Okay, sorry, I forgot to record. Yeah, now it's recording. Okay, cool. So let's start. Voice is breaking. Okay. I think let's see today, guys. Let's just give one more day. Okay, let's see what is happening. Okay. I think if it is not improving and if it is bad, then we will have to have a look at what we can do to resolve this thing, right? So let's see. Okay. So let's get started. Just give me 1 second. Okay. So yeah, you guys have figured out solutions yourself. So I think you can, you know, do that if somebody is sharing links, right? So सब कराया जाएगा, don't worry. Okay. So for people who are having any kind of difficulties, right? So maybe you can shift on the client side if you want. I am not sure, but yeah, I would highly advise that, try attending from the portal itself, right? And, all these things are being taken care of. Okay, cool. Just give me 1 minute and then we can get started. Okay. Okay, the lecture recording will be uploaded on the portal only, so you can check it out there. Or just ask the batch manager once, they will be better able to answer your doubts around when the recordings and where it will be uploaded. Okay, cool. So let's go back and let's start our discussion. So, okay. Okay, so everyone is able to view the screen. I'll just take a confirmation from Zoom once. Everyone is able to view my screen, right? Lecture 2 I had written there, right? It's fine. Okay, cool. So yeah, let's get started, guys. Okay, so before even I start the lecture for today, let me lay out a brief overview of what we are going to discuss today, right? So the agenda of today's class is pretty simple. Okay, we will be starting with data types. Okay, what are the different data types that are available in Java? We discuss about the primitive data types. Okay, then we will understand about declaration, initialization, talk about data, talk about all these different data types. How do we use these different data types? How do we manipulate these different data types, right? So once we are having good understanding of data types, then we will switch to the scanner. Like, how do we take inputs from the user? Okay, so if I want to summarize the outcomes of today's lecture, what I will be trying to cover is data types, and then we will be taking inputs from the user. How do I take inputs from the user? Okay, so we'll get started, right? And after every, let's say, 15-20 minutes, I can turn to the chat, okay, and we can answer doubts there. Okay, so till then I will expect everyone to pay attention of what is going on, and any doubts you have, I'll cater to all your doubts, don't worry. Okay, so let's get started, right? Data types. Okay, so what I want to tell you guys is, any program that you write, okay, so let's say you are writing any program that you write, there will be some data always involved in your program. Okay, you will be operating on some sort of data. Dekho, when you are writing a program, you are trying to solve a particular problem, right? And when you are wanting to solve a particular problem, you will be operating on some data. Okay, so rest assured, whenever you write any code, you will have certain data on which you will be performing your calculations, or you will be performing your algorithm on that particular data. Okay, so what do I do, right? Either I can hard code my data. So I was giving you an example yesterday, right? Let's say I have this number 5 and I want to deal with this number 5 at different places in my code. So either I can write 5 at all the different places in my code, or what did we understand? We understood the concept of variables. Okay, so I told you guys that variables are nothing but variables basically contain data. Let's say if I tell you boss x is equal to 5, so what is happening in my memory? Let's say one block is getting reserved. Okay, 5 is stored in this block, and x is basically pointing to this particular block. Okay, so whenever I say, can you print x to me, so what will happen? 5 will get printed. So you can think of variables like, they are labels of the containers. Okay, so variables contain data. They are containers inside which I am able to store my data. Okay, now the point that comes is, let's say later I tell you that boss X is equal to 10, then what will happen? So whatever data this container was holding, right, that will get overwritten, and now 10 will be stored in this particular cell. So now when you print the value of X, 10 will be printed. Okay. So we understand what are variables, right? In very layman terms, right? We understand what are variables. But now what I want you guys to understand is, whenever you are operating on data, it is not necessarily that it is not necessary or compulsory that my data will always be numbers, right? Your data can also be a decimal number. Let's say you are computing the area of a circle. Okay, so area का formula क्या होता है? The formula for area of circle is pi r square. And what is the value of pi? Pi का value is 3.14. So what I want you guys to understand is, you don't always deal with integers or whole numbers, right? You can also deal with decimal data points, right? You can also deal with strings. Okay, you can also deal with something like, names of people. Okay, and do you think the name of a person will be a number? No. A name will be a proper name. Let's say Adarsh, let's say Ram, any name, right? It will be a proper alphabetical name. Okay. Similarly, let's say you are dealing with passwords, right? So passwords can be alphanumeric and they can contain special characters. So what I want you guys to understand is, whenever you are writing any program, there can be different data types that you are dealing with. There can be different types of data that you are encountering. You can deal with whole numbers, you can deal with decimal numbers, you can deal with names, you can deal with special characters and whatnot, right? So data can be of different types. So what do we do in Java? We have certain different data types. So boss, the makers of Java were intelligent enough to understand that yes, you will be operating on different types of data. So they have given you support for some inbuilt data types. There are already some inbuilt, data types in Java. Okay. So what are the different data types that we will be talking about? Okay. So let me take an example to make you guys understand. So let's say you are dealing with whole numbers. Okay. I think everyone understand what are whole numbers. Integers, they can be positive, negative, or zero. So let's say you are dealing with numbers. I am dealing with numbers, right? So Java gives me 4 different data types. It gives me 4 different data types for whole numbers. And what are these 4 different data types? I have byte. Okay, byte. See, all these data types, right? The data types that I am talking about, I will be talking about 8 different data types. 8 different data types, right? And all these data types that I talk about, they are primitive data types. Okay, the data types that I am talking about right now, they are all primitive data types. Now what do I mean when I say primitive data types? Primitive data types mean they are the most fundamental data types, right? They are the most fundamental data types, right? So you have non-primitive data types also, which we will talk about, a little bit later. But if I want you guys to understand what is a primitive data type, think of it like the most fundamental data type. Okay, these data types are the most fundamental and they are inbuilt inside Java. Okay, we will understand as we progress. Okay, so when we deal with whole numbers, right? So whole numbers can be 8, -8, 0, 77, something like this, right? So when you are dealing with whole numbers, what all data types are available to you? You have byte. Okay, then we have a data type known as short. Okay, then we have a data type known as int, and then we have a data type known as long. So all these 4 different data types are actually used when we are talking about whole numbers. Okay, now what is the fundamental difference between a byte and a short and a int and a long, right? So let's say I will tell you something like this. Okay, so when I say that something, देखो boss, you have to tell the computer what data type you want to use. So let's say somehow, see, I am trying to explain it in the most simplest format that I can think of at this moment. Okay, so let's say I want to tell the computer that, hey computer, you know what? I want to have a data type of byte. I want to have a data type of byte. So what will happen when I say that something is of byte data type? So you know what will happen? One byte, 1 byte of space will be reserved in memory. 1 byte of space will be reserved in memory. Okay. Now when I say that no boss, मैं जो data type store करना चाहता हूँ, right? The data type that I want to store, or let's say the data that I want to store, that is a short type data. The data type is short, right? So when I say that my data type is short, you know what happens? 2 bytes of space are reserved in the memory. Okay. Next, when I say that boss, the data that I am storing, I want to store it inside a data type of int. When I say that my data type is int, then what will happen? 4 bytes of space are reserved in the memory. Okay. And when I say that something is of type long, then 8 bytes of data are reserved in the memory. Okay. Now, I'll take questions. Don't worry, I'll take questions. I know people will have questions, right? Definitely. So, guys, try to understand, what does 1 byte of space mean? 1 byte of space means that you can store only 8 bits. Okay. And what does 4 bytes of space mean? 4 bytes of space means you can store 32 bits of information inside this particular space. So, if I ask you, boss, if I have to store a long number, if I have to store a very large number, right, that cannot fit inside 8 bits. Okay, let's say that I have a very large number that actually requires 32 bits for storage. Then I will have to tell that boss, I need 32 bits of space in my memory. So my data type will be integer or int. Okay. And I will tell you guys, whenever you are dealing with whole numbers, right, whenever you are dealing with integers, the most commonly used data types will be int and long. We will be using int and long enormously. And int is the most commonly used data type. Int is the most commonly used data type. Okay. So how do I use all these things, right? How do I actually use all these things? So for that, I will come to the concept of declaration and initialization. And with this example, I think a lot of things will be clear to you all. Okay. Declaration and initialization. So I am pretty sure that if you guys have had a look at any program, you must have looked at statements like this: int a is equal to 5. Okay. Let's say that inside my code, I have a statement like this: int a is equal to 5. Now what I want to do, I want to analyze this statement in detail, what this statement actually means. And through this, we will understand the concept of declaration and initialization. So what is the actual meaning of this statement, right? What is the actual meaning of this statement? Through this statement, I am telling my computer, or let's say I'm telling my compiler, hey compiler, can you reserve some space for me in the memory? Okay, the computer asks you, kitna space? How much space do you want me to reserve? I am asking the computer, hey computer, can you reserve the space sufficient to hold an int? Okay. So first of all, I tell what is the data type that I want to store. So I tell, hey computer, can you reserve the space for an integer data type? So what will happen? Inside my memory, what will happen? My compiler understands that, boss, you wanted me to reserve a space that is sufficient to store an integer data type int, right? So how much space does int take? There is a rule given inside the computer for Java that, boss, whenever your data type is int, reserve 4 bytes of space inside your memory. So what will happen? Let's say one block is 1 byte. So 4 bytes of space will be reserved in my memory. Okay. So through this statement, I am telling, hey compiler, can you reserve the space in memory for me? How much space? The space that is sufficient to hold an int data type. Okay. So the compiler will reserve the space for me in memory. Let's say the computer reserves space for me in memory, sufficient to hold an int. Okay. And then I'm telling, boss, the label to that region will be A. This is the name of the variable. Then I write my variable name. Ki, boss, you have reserved 4 bytes of space in the memory. Now just put a label to this particular space A. So A is now pointing to this particular space, which is holding whatever number I will be storing. And then I'm writing equal to 5. So what I'm telling, I am giving you the value also. So what I'm telling, hey, can you please reserve the space in memory that is sufficient to hold an integer? Okay, label the space as A, and then please can you store the value 5 in this particular location? So what will happen? What is the entire output of this statement? The entire output is 4 bytes of space will be reserved in memory for you. Okay, then the value 5 will be stored in that particular space of 4 bytes that is reserved for you, and then A will be pointing to this particular space. Okay, so now when you do a print A, system.out.println A, the value 5 will be printed. Okay, this is very important, right? I'll come back to the chats after I discuss this fully, because I want everyone to understand this. So what have I actually done? I first of all specified the data type, then I wrote the variable name, then I wrote this equal to, which is basically the assignment operator, and then I wrote the value 5. So this value 5 will get stored inside the space that is pointed to by A, and that space is basically 4 bytes long. Okay, now in this statement, int A is equal to 5 semicolon, right? This part, int A, this part is basically my declaration part. Int A, this is my declaration part. And when I actually assign a value to my space, right, then this is my initialization part. See, what does declaration means? I am declaring, ki boss, please reserve the space sufficient to hold an integer, and please label the space as A. This is my declaration. I have done this declaration, and through this declaration, space has been reserved in memory for me, and then I am initializing this space with a value of 5. So this part is my initialization. Okay, now let's say later you do A is equal to 10. Then what are you doing? You are assigning a new value. You are assigning a new value to your variable A. So now basically A will hold a value of 10. Okay, so in this line, int A is equal to 5 semicolon, this line is an example of declaration and initialization happening in the same line. Okay, you are declaring and initializing in the same line. But there is no standard rule that you should do a declaration and initialization in the same line. Nobody is telling you, right? You can do something like this also. Let's say I do something like this, int B semicolon. So this is my declaration. So what does this declaration tell? Can you please reserve the space in memory? How much space? Space that is sufficient to hold an int. So what will happen? 4 bytes of space will be reserved, and B is a label to this particular space. Okay, nothing is stored inside this container as of now. Now what happens? Now later in your code, let's say you do B is equal to 4. Okay, so then 4 will be stored in this particular space. So this line is my declaration. This is my declaration in B. I am declaring, boss, please reserve the space sufficient to hold an integer data type. So 4 bytes will be reserved. Okay, and this next line that I have written somewhere later in the code, B is equal to 4. So this is my initialization. So I can do declaration and initialization separately also. There is no hard and fast rule that declaration and initialization need to be done in the same line. And let's say later you do B is equal to, let's say 50. Okay, so this is, you are assigning a new value to the variable B. So this 4 will be removed and 50 will be written inside this container. Okay, so this is the idea of declaration and initialization. Okay, so now you will come and ask me, hey Adarsh, we understood that yes, depending on what type of data you have, you can either go for a byte or a short or an int or a long. Okay, just to give you some context, right? I don't remember the exact values, but if you are reserving the space for a byte, that means you are reserving just 1 byte of space, right? So numbers from minus 128 to 127, only numbers inside this range can be stored inside a byte variable. Okay, if you try to store a number greater than 127, it will not fit inside 1 byte. Okay, similarly for int, you reserve 4 bytes of space in the memory. So you can store numbers in the range of minus 2 raised to 31 to 2 raised to 31 minus 1. So if I have a large number to store in this range, right, from minus 2 raised to 31, say 2 raised to 31 minus 1. So I know, boss, whatever number I want to store, 4 bytes of memory is sufficient for me. So I will basically look for an integer data type. Okay, if you want to store an even larger number, right? So then you will probably go for a long data type and reserve 8 bytes of memory for you. Now, one question that you can come and ask me, hey, why do I have these 4 different data types? Couldn't have I done with just long? Bhaiya, you can ask me now, always reserve 8 bytes. Okay, always reserve reserve the maximum number of bytes and then you can store any number in it, right? You are right. Technically, you are right. But let me give you an example. Suppose you go to a vacation. Okay, you go to a vacation. Okay. Now, if you are just two people, if you are just two people on a vacation, I am pretty sure that you will just book one hotel room. Okay, you will just book one room inside the hotel. But if you are six people, okay, you will go for three rooms. Now tell me, guys, you can argue that boss, for two people I can book three rooms. But is it a viable option? If you are looking to save money and you are in your senses, right? Definitely for two people, you don't choose three rooms, right? Two people can fit inside one room. So you will try to save your money and just book one room. So similar is the case for memory. Okay, what is memory made up of? RAM किससे बनता है? RAM is made up of silicon wafer, right? And silicon is very expensive, right? So we want to do a very efficient utilization of memory. Okay, so that is why these different data types are there. Ki boss, if I know that my numbers can fit inside 2 bytes, why do I even reserve the space for 4 bytes? Just declare your data type as short and do with 2 bytes. Okay, but if I know that the numbers that I will be dealing with are very large, then it doesn't make sense for me to reserve 1 byte or 2 byte. I can reserve maybe 4 bytes or 8 bytes. Okay, everything has a range. Ki boss, byte can store numbers from -128 to 127. Int can store numbers from -2 raised to 31, say 2 raised to 31 - 1. So you have these different ranges, and depending on what type of data you are expecting in your program, you can reserve space accordingly. Okay, cool. Now, one quick question before I turn to the chats, right? Can you tell me one thing? Can I do initialization? Can I do initialization before declaration? Think of it, guys. Can I do initialization before declaration? Question to you. Question to you all. Question to you all. Let's come to the chats now. Question to you all. Can we do initialization before a declaration? And what is the most simple way to understand this? Boss, you have gone on a vacation, right? First, you have to reserve a room in your name and then only you can stay inside the room, right? If you don't reserve the room, then you cannot go and stay inside the room. Similar is the case for memory. Computer will tell boss, first of all, reserve memory. First of all, reserve memory. And how do I reserve? I reserve memory via declaration. So first of all, you have to reserve memory, and then only you can store numbers inside your memory. Okay, so declaration needs to be done before initialization. You cannot do an initialization first and then you go and do a declaration. That is not allowed. Okay, so guys, any questions till now? Any questions till now? Any questions till now? So the key takeaway, what is the meaning of 2 raised to 31? 2 to the power 31 minus 1, right? How to store number greater than long? Correct. How to store? So there should be, right? So I will give you links. I'll give you all articles. I don't exactly remember the ranges. Okay. So it's not important for you to, remember the ranges. But yeah, long is basically 8 bytes. So you can actually compute via that. Okay. Space of long, 8 bytes are reserved. 8 bytes. Okay. Why don't we have a flexible data type? Okay, so Raza, what you are asking, that is basically a non-primitive data type, right? See, the Java developers, they realize that there are some data types which all the people will be using, right? There are integers, there are, floating point numbers, there are fractional, decimal numbers that everyone will be using. So they have built in all these data types with fixed space. Okay, fixed space. 2 raised to 31 minus 1 is 2 raised to 31 and then subtract 1 from that. Okay. Okay. So give example of bit. Bit पे आएंगे हम लोग. We'll come to bit, right? We'll come to bit. Let's come back here, right? So yeah, what are, see, the data types that I am discussing at this moment, right? They are all primitive data types. And what do I mean when I say primitive data types? Boss, they are built in Java. These are the standard data types. It is coded inside Java that for int always 4 bytes will be reserved. For long, always 8 bytes will be reserved. It is all fixed inside Java. These are all primitive data types. Okay. So Raza had asked the question that, boss, can't I have a flexible data type that can adjust according to my needs? So primitive data types are not like that. They have a fixed size. If you say something is long, you are telling it to reserve 8 bytes. Okay. You cannot be flexible and reserve 7 bytes or 6 bytes for a long. That is not allowed. For that, we'll have a look at, non-primitive data types later, but it's not required at this instant of time. Okay. But yeah, everyone should be clear with the concept of declaration and initialization. It is very important, right? It is very important. So I understood the 4 different data types that are existing for whole numbers. And what are those? They are byte, short, int, and long. These are the 4 different data types that are associated with whole numbers. And 99% of the times, 99% of the times, you will be using int data type only. And the remaining 1%, you will use long. Byte and short, I have never used inside my programming journey till now, right? So I'm hoping you also will not be using that. Okay. So int and long should be our major focus when we are dealing with whole numbers. Okay. Now let's move to some other data types. Definitely only whole number is not there, right? You can also get decimal numbers, right? What do I mean when I say decimal numbers? You can get numbers like 7.568. You can get numbers like 3.14182813, whatever, right? You can get, these decimal numbers. So what is the data type for these numbers? So we have 2 different data types that help us to deal with decimal numbers. Okay, what are those? They are basically, first data type is float, and the second data type is double. These 2 data types are basically used for decimal numbers, the numbers which have basically this floating point, right? Decimal ke baad they have places. Okay. So now you will come and ask me, boss, okay, so you are telling me float and double are both the data types used for storing these kind of numbers, right? So what is the difference between float and double? So think of it like this. See, for a decimal number, okay, you all will agree that if I keep more digits after decimal, okay, let's say after 3, I put in 15 digits after decimal, and in another number I just put in 4 digits after decimal. What do you think is more precise? This number which has 15 digits after the dot, this is more precise than this. So what is the idea behind float and double? Okay, so we generally use a float data type if we don't want very high precision. Okay, so see, exact figures I don't remember, and you also don't need to remember the exact figures. Ki boss, how many places after the decimal is for float and how many places after the decimal is for double. I will be sharing links of articles with you, and when you read them, it will be explicitly documented there. Okay, but you just need to understand the idea for now. Okay, what is a float? Let's say for our understanding, I will say that float is basically used for storing lower precision number or less precision number. So let's say if I reserve the space sufficient to hold a floating point number, now I can, let's say, only hold or store, let's say 8 places after decimal. Okay, so if I am telling that something is of a data type float, that means I will record only 8 places after the decimal. And these are just values that I am making up at this point of time. When you read up online articles, you will get the exact values, right? Now, so float basically offers you lesser precision. You have lower number of places after the decimal point. Now, what is double? Double will offer me more precision. So let's say if I am reserving the space for a double, okay, double tells boss, now you are looking for a more precision, high precision number. Okay, so let's think of it like double will maybe, store 15 digits or 15 places after the decimal. Okay, so long story short, whenever you are dealing with decimal numbers, either you deal with float or you deal with double. Float is basically used for storing lesser precision number, and double is basically used for storing higher precision number. If you want more places after the decimal digit, you go for a double. Okay, and if you want lesser places after the decimal digit, you go for a float data type. Okay, we'll see all of these in details when we code it up also, right? But yeah, this is second data type that we are talking about. And again, float and double are also primitive data types. Okay, now after these decimal kind of numbers, the third thing that we can deal with is characters. Okay, we can deal with characters. Now what are characters? Okay, what are characters? think of characters like a single character, okay? So let's say hash, this is one character. Let's say a, this is another character, okay? Let's say question mark, this is another character. Let's say at the rate, this is another character, right? Let's say small a, this is another character. Let's say 5, this can also be a character. So anything that you see on your keyboard, right? Any character that you see on a keyboard, so a single character, you can also encounter characters like these at the rate, a, 5, a, hashtag, right? All these are characters. So anything, any single character that you can type via your keyboard, that can be treated as a character. Okay. So definitely you also need some, some data type to deal with these characters. So whenever I say of character now, a character means only a single character. Single character. It will only be a single character. Okay. And whenever we write characters now, we put it within single quotes. Okay. So this is character A that I am talking about. This is character 5 that I am talking about. Mind you guys, character 5 is different from number 5, right? These two are different. This is a character and this is an integer. Okay. So whenever I say that something is a character means it will have just a single character. Okay. And we tell that it is a character by placing it inside single quotes. Okay. Only one character you can put inside the single quotes. So what is the data type that we use for characters? For characters, the data type that we deal with is char data type, right? So when I say that something is a character, right? I say, boss, can you please reserve the space in memory for holding a char data type? Okay. So how much space will be reserved? Let's say characters are 2 bytes. Okay. So 2 bytes. See, all of these you can read up. I don't remember exact values. I may be wrong also. But let's say that it has been coded up that character basically occupies 2 bytes. So when I say that something is a character, 2 bytes of space will be reserved in the memory, and then a character will be stored at that particular location. So what do? I can do something like this. Char C is equal to, let's say, at the rate. Okay. So what will happen? Space is reserved in the memory. Let's say 2 bytes of, space will be reserved in the memory. Okay. Because it is a data type char, so 2 bytes will be reserved. C will be pointing to this location, and the character at the rate will be stored here. Okay, it will be stored here. So this is a basic character. A basic character you denote within single quotes. Okay, and it is just consisting of one character. Now you can ask me one very simple question. Hey Adarsh, you told me that computer only understands zeros and ones. So how are you storing a at the rate inside? Do you think that the computer will understand at the rate? Or do you think the computer will understand what is this a? No, the computer will not understand. So what generally happens is when we are talking of characters, right? So characters are basically stored as numbers only. Okay. So we have something known as a ASCII coding. ASCII coding, right? ASCII. The full form is American Standard, something I don't remember the full form exactly. But yeah, there is an ASCII coding. So what is the meaning of ASCII coding? Every character has been assigned a number. Okay. So in the ASCII coding, let's say capital A. Okay. Capital A is given a code of 65. Okay. Capital B has a code of 66. So every character will have a code. Every character will have a decimal number or a basic, integer associated with itself. So it is the ASCII mapping. Similarly, small a has a mapping of 97. Small b has a mapping of 98. So every character has a corresponding mapping to a number. So when I say something like this, char c is equal to, let's say, character a. Okay. So do you know what will happen? Internally, how are things stored? Internally, my computer knows that, boss, because this is a character, there should be a numeric mapping. So it will see that character A has a value of 65. The ASCII code is 65. So this 65 will be converted into zeros and ones, and it will be stored for the computer to interpret, right? But for our practical understanding, you can think of it like this. A is stored inside, right? Think of it like A is stored inside, no problem. But you should understand that characters are not stored as it is inside the computer, right? Characters are basically converted to their ASCII or their Unicode, right? This is a more bigger set. Okay, ASCII or Unicode, there is a mapping, and then that number is basically stored inside the computer's memory. Okay, so this is something about characters. Okay, let me just have a look at the chat if we are on track. ASCII one more time. See, ASCII is basically, देखो, characters होता है ना, the characters are not stored as it is inside the memory. They will be converted to some number. Char can store 1 byte. Okay, you can see it up, right? I don't remember the exact ranges. You can see what is the space that character occupies in Java. Okay. How long do primitive variables exist in memory? That's a good question, right? So Java has its own GC module, right? The garbage collector modules. So when your code actually exits, right? When your code exits, then all the variables that are associated with that context, now those will get destroyed. Okay. You will understand it in more detail when we actually, go for, let's say, functions. No, numeric values don't have ASCII. ASCII is for only characters. Okay. How do we store root of -1? Good question. I think you have to store it in a different format, right? You cannot store it like this. So yeah, that's a good inquisitive question, and I would highly recommend you to Google it up if you want to store imaginary numbers. How do you? Okay. So is this char making sense to everyone? Single quotes, we generally tell single quotes, right, to say that yes, this is a character. A single character is basically put inside a single quotes, right? And the important thing for character is their ASCII mappings or their Unicode mappings. Okay. In character, you can store only a single letter. Only a single letter can be stored. You cannot store 2 letters. Okay. So Mayur, 0 has an ASCII value 48, but 0 is an integer. So that is what I am telling you, that these two things are different. See, if I tell you, boss, interpret this 0 as an integer, then this is an integer. But if I tell you something like this, char c is equal to character 0, this 0 and this 0 are different, right? You can multiply, add on this 0. Okay, see, if this is a 0, right, this is an integer. So you can add, subtract, multiply, divide, and perform operations on the integers, right? But if I am saying you have a character 0 within single quotes, now, then this 0 is now a character that you have typed in from the keyboard. Or let's say this is a character 0. This is not a integer 0, right? So you cannot perform all those operations here. So definitely this 0 and this 0 are different. Okay, cool. Okay. So I think this is clear, right? So this was a char data type, which was another primitive data type. So how many primitive data types have we looked at? 3 and 7. So we have had a look at 7 different primitive data types. Now only one more primitive data type is left. What is that? That is Boolean. Okay, let's discuss something about Boolean data type. What is a Boolean data type? Guys, you can encounter scenarios where something either takes a value of true or a false. Let's say I ask you one question. Are you eligible to vote? Either you will tell me yes or you will tell me no. There are only 2 states to my question, right? If I ask you, hey, are you above 21 years or are you above 22? Either your answer is a yes or is it a no. There is no in between, right? So there are certain values, right? There can be certain data types that either contain a true or a false. There are only 2 states associated. Okay. So for these particular data that can either contain a true or a false, you can only have 2 values. So we come up with the data type of a Boolean. So what is a Boolean data type? When I say something like this, let's say Boolean d is equal to true. Okay. So what does this mean? That the value of this variable d is true. Okay. So a Boolean data type can either hold a true or a false. As simple as that. So can you guys logically think and tell me what is the minimum space that you think a Boolean data type should consume? What is the minimum space that you would think a Boolean data type should consume? 1 byte or even lesser? 1 bit, right? 1 bit. Okay. So let's go back. I'll tell you. See, the space that you need to store a Boolean data type, right? That is 1 bit. Only 1 bit. Why? See, if a value is false, you can just store 0. If a value is true, you can store 1. Only 2 different values, now either 0 or 1. Let's say I denote 0 is for false and 1 is for true. Okay. So if I say Boolean d is equal to true, think of it like 1 bit of space is reserved in your memory. 1 is written inside that space and d is pointing here. Okay. So a Boolean data type only needs 1 bit of space inside the memory. So a Boolean data type is a data type that can either hold a true or a false. No other different values you can store inside a data type Boolean. Okay, as simple as this. Okay. Now, one quick question. Is it valid? Is it a valid statement? Do you think it will work? Do you think it will work? No, it will not work, right? I am not switching to the chats at this moment, but I'm pretty sure most of you would have written a no there, right? Because I have written 2 characters and I told you character can only have a single letter. So this is wrong, right? Okay. So far, if I want to conclude what I have discussed till now, so we talked about 8 different primitive data types in Java. And what were those 8 primitive data types? Byte, short, okay, then we had int, then we had long. These were for whole numbers. Then we had float, then we had double. These were for decimal numbers, okay. Then we had char for a single letter or a single character, and then we had boolean for true or false kind of values. So these are the 8 primitive data types in Java. Primitive meaning fundamental. These are already built in, and whenever you use any of these data types, a fixed amount of space is reserved. So when I say char, let's say 2 bytes will always be reserved. When I say boolean, 1 bit will always be reserved, right? So these are the primitive data types, or the most fundamental data types that are present in Java. Okay. Now, if there are primitive, then there should be something known as a non-primitive data type also. And what is a non-primitive data type? Boss, the non-primitive data type is basically something that is let's say user defined, right? So it will not have a fixed space, right? The space will vary depending on what you are trying to store. Okay. So one non-primitive data type is already available for Java, right? And other are objects, which we'll talk later. Okay. So one very important non-primitive data type that we want to understand at this moment is a string. Okay. A string is a non-primitive data type. And why do I say a string is a non-primitive data type? A string is nothing but it is a collection of characters. What is string? A string is nothing but it is a collection of multiple characters placed one after the other. Okay. So let's say I write A, B, C, @ #1, 2. Okay. These are multiple characters that I have placed one after the other. So if I put it within double quotes, I am saying that, boss, this is a string. Okay. So a string is nothing but it is a collection of multiple characters placed one after the other. And how do I denote strings? I denote strings using double quotes, right? So if you remember yesterday's class, right, when we were doing something like system.out.println, let's say this, hello world, blah, 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 right? So what was this? This was consisting of multiple characters, HELLO, space, WORLD, space, BLA. So these were multiple characters one after the other. And because I had put double quotes, that means this is a string. So whenever I used a string inside a system.out.println, whatever was mentioned in that string, that got printed to the screen. Okay. So a string is a non-primitive data type. Why non-primitive? Because it can be made up by combining multiple characters one after the other. So you can generate a string using the primitive data type of a character. Okay. That is why string is a non-primitive data type. And you are correct. See, you are correct in identifying that this string and a very long string, right? They will take different amount of space inside memory, definitely. And depending on how long you are giving for a string, now Java is intelligent enough to decide how much space should be reserved for that particular string. So you don't need to worry because now it is a non-primitive data type. So how do I define strings? How do I make strings? S is capital, right? So let's say string S is equal to, let's say I write hello, my name. Okay, semicolon. And then when I do something like system.out.println S, what will happen? This entire string will be printed as it is. Okay. So a string is a non-primitive data type. Non-primitive data type. Why? Because it is made up of by concatenating multiple characters one after the other. And you can put whatever characters you want inside your string. And whenever you write a string, that should be enclosed within double quotes. Okay. That is how you determine it is a string. Okay. So now let's go to the compiler and let's try to write some code so that we all are clear with this and we are able to manipulate some data according to our understanding. Okay. So let me exit from the PPT. Okay, let's come back. Any questions that space is also a character, right? Space is also a character. See, for the computer, space is nothing different. A plus B operation will give their ASCII addition. True and false are case sensitive. A plus B. Okay. Yeah, I think all the questions, right? देखो जो questions आप generate कर लो, right? It is very interesting, right? We always get questions, right? And I always encourage you guys, see, when you have compilers, right, you can type it and get answers for yourselves, right? It's, yes, passwords are generally a string, correct? How much space is consumed by a string? That depends on what is the string that you want to store, right? It depends, right? We cannot say that, okay, 2 bytes will be consumed for a string or 10 bytes will be consumed for a string. Okay. How can we print a sentence with double quotes in the middle? That's again a very good question, right? So you need to understand something known as escape sequences or escape characters for that, right? I think it's good that you are generating all these curiosity doubts, right? And this is where I find it very good, right? So now, you also explore yourselves and then you come back with answers. It's like more of a two-way learning, right? If I tell you everything, then you don't even put the effort of going back and reading up stuff on your own. Okay. Pi is not a character. It's a double or a floating point. Okay. Okay. I just joined lecture. What up? So in the first lecture, we did a basic recap, or let's say a basic introduction to computer programming, right? That was it. Nothing more than that, right? We didn't do anything more than that. Okay. Yeah, I'll take all doubts. I'll take all doubts. I know you have multiple doubts, right? Don't worry. Okay. So see, generally I also use this compiler. So you have an online gdb.com. You have the online Java compiler, right? So whatever code you want to write, you can write here. And when you run, you will get the output. Okay. So this is a compiler that I very frequently use online. Okay. So you also can use this. The AccuJob portal one is also good. You can also use that, or any other compiler that you feel comfortable with, right? You can use any compiler. Okay. Now, acha guys, just one thing to make clear. Is everyone clear with the difference between a print and a println? And did you try the two questions that I told you to try in yesterday's session? Yes, all done. Great, great. So I think everyone understood that stuff. And क्या हुआ इसमें? Okay, so yeah, in today's doubt session, those two will be discussed and then they will be taking up your doubts from lecture one. So whatever doubts you have, feel free to ask our instructors, okay? So we have given explicit instructions that after, the discussion is completed for the two questions, then you can put in any questions that you want, okay? Can you declare a variable without initializing it? Good question. Good question. Let's try that only. Okay, let's try that. Okay. So I am assuming that everyone is clear with system.out.println and system.out.print. Now let's try to do something like this. Okay. Is the font size fine for all? I'll zoom it up. Is the font size fine? Let's take it out a little bit. Okay. Okay. So let's say I write int a semicolon. So what is it that I have done? This is a basic declaration. Okay. And let's say I want to do a println. Okay, I want to do a println. Acha guys, first of all tell me, if I do something like this and I do a system.out.println a, do you all agree that 5 will be printed and not a? If I wanted to print a, then I would have to write a string like this, right? If I wanted to print a. If I want to print the contents of variable a, then I will put it without any quotes, right? So system.out.println a will print 5 for me. Let's try to run it and see, right? So yeah, it can take a little bit of time. Okay, hello world and 5 is printed. So pretty much with our expectations, right? Now let me take up a question from the chat, right? And I'll ask you, right, what should happen? Let's say I declare a variable a, okay, and I never initialized it, right? So I did a system.out.println a. So let's now try to run it and see. Now see, this is complaining. The compiler is complaining. Variable a might not have been initialized. It is complaining. Ki boss, you have reserved space inside the memory, but you haven't stored anything there. So why are you wasting memory by reserving it? Somebody else can come and place his information there. Guys, try to think very logically. If I reserve memory and I am not putting anything there, I am wasting that memory, right? Somebody else can use that memory. So why do you want to do that? Yes, this issue is only there in Java. In C++ and everything, you have garbage values there. Okay. No, Java doesn't have garbage values. So for primitive data types, you have to initialize, and for non-primitive data types, you have default values, which we will talk later, right? So for our understanding at this point of time, you definitely have to do a declaration, and also you have to do an initialization. Otherwise, the compiler will come and complain to you. Okay. Now let's try to do this. Let's say int a is equal to, let's say I want to store 100. Now let's say I want to store 599. Okay. No issues. 599 is sufficient and it can be easily stored inside an integer variable. That's fine and that's not a problem at this point of time. Right. Now let's say I want to increase my number. Okay, very large number I have given. Let's try to run it. Okay. So now what it is complaining? It is complaining, boss, the number is too large. The number is too large. It cannot be stored inside an integer variable. It is like you have reserved the 1 BHK and you are trying to fit in 8 people inside that same room. So the hotel complains, ki, boss, we have a strict policy that you cannot put very large numbers inside an integer data type. So it complains that, boss, the integer number is very, very large. So what do you think should be our approach? What do you think I should do? Anybody, can you help me? What do you think I should do here? What do you think I should do? It's giving me a problem, right? So yeah, the first and foremost answer should be that, okay, maybe do a long. So now what I am understanding, that, boss, I have reserved the space for a long data type. Okay, I have reserved the space for a long data type. So now this time it should not complain and hopefully it should be able to fit inside variable a, whatever number I am writing. Okay, now let's try to run it again. Okay, again it is complaining integer number. Now you must think, boss, the number is a long number. How is it an integer number? Now here I come to a very important concept, right? So what happens is, whenever you have statements like this, okay, whenever you have statements assigning value, this works from right to left. These statements, let's say you write a is equal to something, these statements work from right to left. So what happens? First of all, this number is evaluated and then this is stored inside this variable a. Think of it like this. Think of it like this. I'll tell you what is the problem that's happening. So if you look here, long a is equal to, let's say, 5999, some number of nines. Okay. So how will this statement run? First of all, the right hand side is evaluated. First of all, the right hand side is evaluated. Okay. And then this number is stored in this variable a. Okay. So when this number is evaluated now, the compiler by default reads all the whole numbers as integers. See, you have reserved the space. You have reserved the space. Aisa socho. You have reserved space in memory for a long, right? You have reserved 8 bytes, and might be this number can be stored inside 8 bytes. But when the compiler reads this number now, it doesn't know that you have reserved the space for a long. It will read this number as an integer only, and then it will complain, ki, boss, I am reading this number as an integer, and an integer number cannot be this large. So there is some problem. So I have to explicitly tell the compiler, ki, hey compiler, the number that you are reading, that is not an integer number, that is a long number. So what do we do for that? We explicitly write a capital L or a small l at the end of the number. And what does this indicate to the compiler? It indicates, hey, the number that you are reading, that is a long number. So it will not complain, okay, the number is a long number and long number can hold this number. That's not a problem. And then it will go and store this long number inside this variable a. Okay. So if I come here, if I put here a capital L, okay, I am telling the compiler, hey compiler, the number that you will be reading, that is a long number. Okay, now let's try to run it. Hopefully this is good enough. Yeah, so this works, right? Now it doesn't complain. Ab kya hua? The compiler saw that, boss, this number needs to be studied as a long number. So no problem. This number is permissible for a long data type, and then it will store this number inside this variable a. Okay. So whenever you are hard coding values, right? Whenever you are hard coding values for a long data type, make sure that you write capital L or small l after the number so that the compiler interprets it as a long number. Otherwise, it will always read in whole numbers as integers. Okay. Similarly, you can also perform computations. Let's say you perform computations like this. Okay. So say int is equal to, okay, This is not permissible, right? एक बार आपने long a use कर लिया, then you cannot do int a. Okay, let's write a different variable name. Okay, int num1. My first number is, let's say, 10, and let's say my second number int num2 is, let's say, 25. Okay, now let's say I want to print the addition of these two numbers, right? So what can I do? I can print simply a plus b. Okay, so what will be printed? Sorry, not a plus b. What am I doing? Num1 plus num2. So what will happen? Num1 is 10, num2 is 25. So you are adding two integers, right? So 10 plus 25 is 35. So when I run this, you will see that 35 is printed on the screen. Let's see. Okay, 35 is printed. So you can perform all sorts of mathematical operators, and I am pretty sure that all of you, I had discussed this yesterday also, plus, minus, into, divide. Okay, I'll share reading articles today also for this. Plus, minus, into, divide, and modulo. All of you should be familiar with these 4-5 mathematical operators, right? And I have discussed all of these yesterday. Okay, so one quick question: which operator can you use to check if a number is even or odd? हाँ करूंगा, यूजर इनपुट भी दूंगा. Percentage. Okay, so correct. I think most of you are clear with that. Okay, so if I want to check if a number is in, even or odd, can I not use the modulo operator? How? I will see what is the remainder left when the number is divided by 2. So let's say I do num modulo 2. Okay, and if the answer to that is 0, if the answer to that is 0, that means the number is divisible by 2. So that is an even number. And if the number is not divisible by 2, you will get a modulo 1. Okay, so basically that means that the number is odd. Why are we writing L? Why are we writing L? Good. So see, what I am telling, what I'm trying to make you understand is, if you don't write an L now, see, first of all, this right side of the expression is evaluated. So by default, the numbers will be read as integers. So the compiler will complain, ki, boss, the number that you have written, that is too long or too large to be stored inside an integer. Okay, it will read this as an integer. It does not see that you have reserved the space for a long. So I have to explicitly tell the compiler that, hey compiler, the number that you are reading, that is a long number. So I will be writing L afterward, right? And all these things you have to do when you are hard coding the values, right? If you take inputs from the user, things become more simpler. Okay, so this is one thing that I wanted to make you guys understand. Okay, and you can try to work on this, right? Plus, minus, into, divide, modulo, all these different things, right? Now similarly, if I want you guys to understand other data types, right? So long ho gaya, int ho gaya, right? Byte and short I will skip for the time being, not needed at all, right? Now let's say I want to write a double. Okay, let's say double D. Let's increase the font size maybe. Excuse me, guys. Let's say 3.145, anything, right? Let's say this thing. Okay, and let's say I'm doing a println of D. Okay, now if I run my code, not a problem, right? That is printed as it is, as we were thinking. Now there is a similar problem that exists with the case of double and float. So by default, whenever my compiler reads a decimal number now, it will read it as a double. It will read it as a double. Okay, now let's say I try to write something like this. Let's say, I'll tell you what happens. Okay, and let's say I do a println of f. Okay, I print this variable out. So let's try to run and see what happens, and we'll understand one more thing here. Okay, so it tells possible lossy conversion from double to float. And can you tell me why this happens? My compiler first of all reads this number, and because this is a decimal number, by default it is read as a double. Okay, so I have read this number as a double, and then I am trying to store it inside a float. So what will the compiler tell me? Boss, you are trying to store a double inside the space that is sufficient to hold a float. So there can be a possible loss of data. Okay, see, I and you know that this is a floating point number and there will be no loss of data, let's say. But the compiler will say that, boss, the number that I am reading, I by default read it as double. Okay, and when I try to store a double inside the space that is sufficient to hold a float, it will tell me, boss, you are storing a high precision number inside a space that is sufficient to hold a low precision number. So boss, there can be some lossy conversion, so it will error out. So if I want to tell the compiler, ki, hey compiler, don't worry, the decimal number that you are reading, that is a floating point number. So what do? I have to explicitly write here capital F or small f after the number. Ki, boss, the number that you read, that is a floating point number. So store that number inside the floating point variable and then print it out. Okay, capital F or small f, it's your wish. So try to run it, and now you will see no errors and everything is printed as it is, right? So this is another important thing, right? So two key takeaways will be, for whole numbers, the default reading is integers. It reads as integers, right? And for the decimal numbers, the compiler by default reads the numbers as double. Okay. Now, similarly, if I want to, just write some other data types, let's say char c is equal to, let's say, percentage. This is one character. I'm just writing everything together only. Boolean d is equal to, let's say, true. Okay. And see, you don't write capital T, right? You have to write a small t. This is case sensitive. Okay. So let's say Boolean d is equal to true, and I also write a string s is equal to, within double quotes, hello, my name. Okay. Now, if I want to print all these, you can see the outputs just for your understanding. Okay. If I run it, you will see all the different data types, getting printed. Okay, Boolean d is already okay. So it's complaining that boss, d was already of type double. How can you redefine it, right? This is another thing, right? If you have used a variable now, you cannot change its data type. See, double d kar diya na. Now you cannot declare it again. Once you have declared a variable, you cannot redeclare that variable. So you will have to use a different variable. Let's say e. Okay. Oh, sorry. I think I needed to change it here also. Okay. So see, percentage true, hello, my name. Okay. So this is all about literals. And what are literals? Literals are basically when you are hard coding the value of your variable. See, I have hard coded the value of A. I have hard coded num1's value. I have hard coded the value of D. I have provided the value of everything. So this is known as literals when you are hard coding, right? So is everyone clear till now? Let's have a look at. Yes, is it? If you are writing f at last, it is a float. It is a float. It is a float. Okay. Repeat float f. Float f is nothing. See, this basically what happens if you try to understand, right? See, what is happening is you are writing 3.1456, right? If you didn't write this f, then the compiler interprets it as a double. And then it sees that you are trying to store a double inside a float. So boss, there can be some lossy conversion. There can be some data loss. So you have to explicitly tell the compiler that, hey compiler, the number that you read here, 3.1456, that is a floating point number. Read it as a floating point number. And then when it stores this floating point number inside this float variable f, it will not complain. Okay, because there is no chance of data loss. Okay. Okay. I'll just take 2 minutes. See, literal means, like, think of literal as a constant, right? So abhi, what we are doing is we are basically defining the value of all the variables, right? I am not interacting with the user. Okay. I am basically just hard coding the values of all the things. So that is what I mean by literals. It's like constants, right? You are defining the values. You are not letting the user decide the values. No, it doesn't matter if the number is, if the letter is small or uppercase, right? Hard coding matlab you are just writing up the value yourself. You are providing the value yourself. You are not letting the user interact and give the value. Okay. Okay. Data assigned, right? Whatever data, you are putting the value yourself, right? You are hard coding the value. You are putting in the value yourself. That is basically a literal. Okay. Okay. Cool, guys. I think let's move forward. Okay. So yeah, I know you will have doubts, a lot of doubts. Okay. So I'll share articles also. So एक बार वो भी read करना. Double quotes and single quotes is, see, double inverted commas is for strings and single inverted commas is for characters. Okay. Cool. I'll again move back. Just give me 1 second. I'll drink some water also. Okay. So now print pi, then why don't we use alphabet for shorts? Okay. So yeah, Rajkumar, you can try writing for shorts, right? Try writing for shorts and see what happens, right? So it's all about trying and testing, right? See, one thing that is very good about programming is whenever you have any doubt, right, you have a compiler with you. So you can always try to run things on a compiler and see what is the output. And then you have to explain that. Okay. How can I print hello Naeem? सब बताऊंगा, सब बताऊंगा. Okay. Cool. Uh, Runtime initialization is not possible. Okay. Cool. I think I'll move forward. Okay. Any other doubts that you have, you can, check with me on Discord. Okay. So I think we'll move forward. How to define variables like pi? So pi will be basically mostly, see, this pi is a very common thing, right? So I will expect that someone would have already written pi and I would have to import and use it. I will tell you later. Okay. I am thinking that there should be already an inbuilt pi available to me. Okay. I'll tell you later. Cool. So let's move forward. Let's move forward. Okay. So far we are all clear about the different data types and all the basic operations that you can, actually perform on your data types. Now comes the second interesting part. Boss, you always don't have to put, okay, I'll just go back to my screen. Discord ID is Adarsh112, you can say. Okay. And guys, whatever doubts you are getting, I'll highly encourage you to Google them up once, right? Because when you get inside the software industry also, now you will see that there are many things which are new, right? And Googling is a very important skill. We in companies also try to Google up stuff and learn more about it, right? So whenever you have doubts, your first friend should be like, you go through the lecture, it's not been discussed. You try to read articles, search on the internet, you get answers, interact with your friends. If still you don't get answers, you come back, ask in the doubt session. See, via this now, you will also learn ki how do I explore and learn new things, okay? Because I don't want to spoon feed everything to you. Otherwise, you will get dependent. It's ultimately your journey. I am there to facilitate and help you guys in understanding everything. But doubts, I will encourage ki ek baar aap Google up karo, listen, read upon it once. If you understand, fine. If you don't understand, I am always there. Hai na? But yeah, if I give you the answers at the same time, at the same spot, you will never understand how to search and how to come up with answers on your own, right? So that is something I'll highly recommend all of you. Okay, cool. So far so good, right? Now the question comes, boss, we have understood everything. Abhi tak to sab samajh mein aa gaya, right? We have understood what is happening, but it's not a very good idea. It's not a very good idea to always hard code values, right? It's not always a good idea to put in the values inside here. Okay, I might want to write a code that takes two numbers from the user and sums it up, right? So basically, whenever you are writing any program, you might want it to interact with the user. Okay, you might want ki bhaiya, my user is providing me certain inputs and I need to process the inputs that the user is given me. I don't want to hard code values. I want to interact with the user. So that is where we come to the second part of today's class, which is taking inputs from the user. How do I take inputs from the user? Okay. And the important thing that we are going to discuss for, taking inputs is basically scanner. Okay. So let me first write, right? So I'll first, write a line for you all, and then I'll try to explain what does it mean. How do you understand it in a simple manner? Okay. So I'm writing a line here. Scanner, let's say SC is equal to new scanner system.in. Okay. No need to worry if you don't understand it at this point of time. I'll tell you everything, right? So see guys, you need to take an input, right? You need to take inputs from the user, right? So think of it that boss, a scanner is an object. A scanner is a device which will be helping you to take inputs from the user. Think of it that a scanner is a remote. Scanner है ना, remote है मेरे लिए, और उस remote के help से I will be taking inputs, right? So you all have TV remotes, you all have remotes of your television, right? When you press back button, you go back to the previous channel. When you press, let's say, a forward button, you go to the next channel. So every button has its own functionality. So what I'm asking you to understand at this point of time is, think of it like, boss, the scanner is a remote. ऐसा सोचो, the scanner is a magical remote which will help you to take inputs from the user. How do you write a scanner? I write scanner. Okay, compare it with this int a. So a is a variable. A is the name of the variable, and this variable is of type int. So when I write something like scanner sc, what do I need to say? I mean to say, boss, sc is a label. Label to what? It is a label to a scanner. Okay, so the name of my scanner is sc. Okay, you can give any name that you want. I am taking sc. So the name of my scanner is sc, and then I'm writing new scanner, and within brackets I am writing system.in. So what does it mean? Think of it like this line. Okay, if I want to make you guys understand in the most simplest way, what is the effect of this line, right? So let me tell you like this. Scanner, let's say you want to give the name scan, कुछ भी name दे सकते हो, is equal to new scanner. Okay, see, I won't go into the details of classes, objects and all those things at this point of time. It's not relevant, right? अभी मेरे को input लेना सीखना है. I don't want to worry about what is happening in classes, objects and all those things, right? So how do I understand this line? Scanner scan is equal to new scanner system.in. So think of it like, boss, you have a remote. A remote is getting created, okay? A scanner remote is getting created. What is the name of the remote? The name of the remote is scan. So think of it that this is your TV remote by the name of scan, okay? And who is creating this remote? When I'm writing new scanner, that means I want to create a new remote. A new remote will be created, and the name of the remote is scan. Okay. And within brackets, I write system.in. That means this scanner remote will take inputs from the standard input of the system. So whatever is the input of the system now, this remote will take inputs from there. So I am telling you, boss, I have created a new remote which can take inputs from the input of the system, that is from the keyboard. Whatever is the standard input of the system, this remote can take inputs from that system. Okay, and what is the name of this remote? The name of this remote is scan. Aa gaya remote, you got the remote, right? Now you can use this remote later on to take inputs from the user. Okay, now there will be many buttons on this remote, right? I'm trying to make it as simple as possible, right? There will be many buttons on this remote, right? If I want to take an integer as input, there will be one button, and the name of the button will be, let's say, next int. When I press the button next int, an integer will be taken input from the keyboard. Okay. Now let's say when I want to read a double, okay, there will be a button by the name of next double. Okay. So what I want you guys to understand, what is the implication of this statement? The simple implication of this statement is a scanner object is created for you. And think of the scanner object like a remote that will be taking inputs from the standard input of the system. And the name of the remote is scan. As simple as that. And this remote will have multiple buttons on it. And pressing different buttons, you can take different inputs from the keyboard. Okay. So what are the buttons that we are interested in? What are the buttons that we are interested in? So the first thing that we want to learn is, how do I take an integer input from the user? Okay. I want to take an integer input from the user. I want to read an integer from the keyboard. Okay. So what is the name of my remote? My remote name is sc. Okay. So I do something like this. Int a is equal to sc dot next int. So my remote name is sc, and inside that remote I have a button named next int. Now what this next int will do? Think of it, next int is nothing. It is a function. Okay, we'll go into details later. But think of it, next int is a method that is associated with the scanner object. And this will help you to take integer input from the user or from the terminal. It will take inputs of integers. So when I write this something, what will happen? An input will be taken from the terminal, and then that value will be stored inside the variable a. Okay, so I'll try to help you guys. Okay, so let's take an example. Okay, so I have basically taken two integers as inputs, and then I'm trying to print it. Okay, now let's try to run it, right? And then we'll learn another important thing. So it will error out, you will see. So the compiler is telling me, boss, I cannot find the symbol scanner. The compiler is telling me, I don't know what is a scanner. क्या होता है भाई scanner? पता ही नहीं है मेरे को. What is a scanner? I don't know. Right. So why is this problem coming? See guys, you and I know that there is something known as scanner, right? But let's say you want to write, no, I am telling you there is a printer. Let's say I'm telling you there is a printer. What I want you to understand is you cannot write anything like this and expect that the compiler will know it, right? See, the people who wrote Java, they knew that taking inputs from the user will be a very, very common task. So they have written all the code for scanner. They have written what is a scanner, how will a scanner function, everything they have written for you. But currently my compiler is unaware of that. My compiler doesn't know what is a scanner. How will it know a scanner? How will it know what is a scanner? I write a line here, import java.util.scanner. I will tell you what is the meaning of this particular line. Okay. So what actually happens is, see, we have to understand the concept of packages. What are packages? Again, in today's read, you will get an article on packages also. So think of packages like a folder. Okay. The best way that I can tell you is, let me go to the PPT. Okay. So think of it like, think of packages as folders, right? And those folders have basically code written in them, right? So somebody has already written what is a scanner, and that scanner is already available in some package. Okay. So when I write something like import java.util.scanner, now, what am I actually telling the compiler? That, hey, compiler, you know what? Inside the library of Java, inside the Java's library, there is a package by the name of util. Okay. So there is a very big library of Java. Inside this library, there is a util package. There is a util folder. Okay. And inside this util package, there is a file by the name of scanner. So if you import that file, then you will know what a scanner is and what are the different methods associated with a scanner. So when I write import java.util.scanner, I am telling, hey compiler, can you please import from the Java standard library? There is a util package or a util folder. And inside this util package, you have a file by the name of scanner. Can you please import that file for me? And when you import that file, you will no longer complain to me what is a scanner, because somebody has already written the definition of the scanner, and I can simply import that file so that you are aware of what a scanner is. Okay. There is another thing that you will see that is written many places, that is import java.util.star. So star is just a shorthand way of telling import everything. So I am telling the compiler, hey compiler, inside the standard library of Java, there is a util package. Can you import all the files that are present in the util package? Okay. So all the files that are present inside the util package, that will be imported. And now also my compiler will know what a scanner is. Okay. So this is the basic idea of package. Think of package as a folder which contains pre-written code that other people have written. And in order to use their code, you simply have to import those files that are present in the package. Okay. So I generally prefer import java.util.star. So import everything that is present inside the util package. So now my compiler will at least not complain to me what is a scanner. Now it knows what is a scanner, right? So now let me run it and see what happens. Okay. So hello world was printed. It's a sequential flow of execution, right? And now it is waiting for me. Can you tell me where is my code waiting? My code is waiting at this line, sc.nextInt. Now I have pressed the nextInt button, that there is no integer only. So it is waiting. Ki boss, I want to read an integer. Once you give me an integer, I will read it and then move ahead. So when this cursor is blinking, now I am standing on line number 14, waiting for an integer, right? So let's say I give it an input from the keyboard. Let's say my number is 15. So after 15, the moment I press enter, okay, when I write 15 and let's say I press enter now, then the moment I press enter, this will know that yes, you have written your number and it will read the number 15. So this next int will read the number till it gets a space or a new line character. Okay. So the next int method will read an integer from the terminal until it encounters a space or it encounters a new line character. So the moment I press and enter, I know that I have written all the information for this line. So see what happens. 15 is it. So kya hua? When I pressed enter, sc.nextInt worked. It read this number 15. Okay. Saw that then there is a new line character. So it stopped reading. assigned this 15 to A, and then in the next line I've printed the value of A, which is 15. And then again it is waiting for me. Where is it waiting? It is waiting at line number 16. It is expecting one more integer. So let's say I provide another integer, let's say 295. Okay. The moment I press enter, sc.nextInt will read this integer 295 from the terminal, assign it to the variable B, and it will print it on the screen. See, 295 print ho gaya. So does everyone understand this part? क्या हुआ अभी? Yes. Scanner, I am using scanner because I want to take inputs from the user, right? That's why. Repeat. Okay, I'll repeat. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, see, I have made a scanner, right? So let's try to run this code, right? Let's try to run this code. So see, first of all, hello world is printed. Then a scanner object is created, right? And just give me 1 second. Yeah. So the scanner object is created. After that, you are on line number 14. You are standing on line number 14. And what are you doing? You are waiting. See, you are on sc.nextInt. So sc.nextInt is waiting for an integer. Ki boss, I am waiting for an integer. Once you write an integer and give it to me, I will read it and store it in the variable A. So let's say I write an integer here, 1, 2, 3, 4. I have written an integer, and now see, I press a space, I press whatever, right? It doesn't, it doesn't understand that I have written till now. How will it understand that I am done? How does sc.nextInt understand that I am done writing the contents? When I press and enter now, sc.nextInt knows that yes, I have written all the contents for that particular line. So let's say I have written 1, 2, 3, and I press and enter. So the moment I press and enter, this knows that yes, I have given the input for that line. So it will read 1, 2, 3, okay, and see that after 1, 2, 3 there is a new line character. You have gone to the next line. So it reads 1, 2, 3, stores it in the variable A, and then I have printed A in the next line. So see, system.out.println A prints 123 in the next line. Now what is happening? Again the cursor is waiting. Again the cursor is blinking. Why it is blinking? Because I am at line number 16. And sc.nextInt hasn't found any integer. It hasn't found an integer, right? So it is waiting for me to give it an input. So let's say I give 456 and I put a space and I put a 120 to a 12. Okay. Now, if I press an enter, can you tell me what will be printed? Let's try to understand. Can anybody tell me what will be printed? 456. Okay, let's try to. Okay, so 456 was printed, right? So what actually happened when I pressed enter now? So my line number 16 now knows that yes, I have given the input for that particular line. So now what will happen? sc.nextInt starts reading. It reads the integer 456. And the moment it gets a space, it knows that boss, I am done reading the integer. So it will store this integer 456 inside the variable B. So this integer 12 that you have typed now, this will get ignored. Okay, if you want to read, you need to have another nextInt. Okay, so that is what I am telling. NextInt will basically read an integer until it gets a space or it gets a new line character, and then it will stop reading, store the integer in the variable, and then whatever you want to do, you can. Okay, let's take another variation of this same thing, right? So I'm running. Now this time it's waiting for input, and let's say I give 125 space 20. Acha. Now the moment I press enter, do you think the program will once again wait for me somewhere down? Tell me. I have given two numbers separated by space. Do you think that the program will wait for me somewhere down if I press enter? No, it will not, right? See, what happens is, it's pretty interesting, right? If you see, if you press enter, right, 125 and 20 are printed on two different lines and your job is done. So what happened? The moment I press enter here now, sc.nextInt know that I have given the input for this line, so it starts reading. So it reads 125, encounters a space, so it stores 125 in the variable A, and I print 125. Now the moment I come to line number 16 now, sc.nextInt sees that boss, there is already an integer pending in this line. The cursor was here. The cursor was here at the blank space, right? And sc.nextInt sees that yes, there is already a number waiting to be read, right? So it will again process this number 20. It will get a new line character, stop, store the number 20 inside variable B, and then I am printing B. Okay, so I have basically given both the inputs together. Okay, so is the next int method making sense to everyone? Acha, just for your one more clarity, if I do something like this, 50, okay, if I press enter, what do you think will be read inside integer a? Only 50, right? Now as soon as I press enter, now sc.nextInt knows that some input has been given, and I know that sc.nextInt doesn't read spaces, so it will skip all these spaces. It will read the number 50, then it sees that there is a new line character, it stores the number 50 inside this integer, and then it goes to the next line and waits for me, right? So sc.nextInt will basically read an integer until it gets a new line character or it gets a space, right? It doesn't read spaces. So is everyone clear with this idea? Repeat. Okay. See, I'll try to repeat once again, right? So I'll try to repeat it also. See, what is happening is next int, right? So whenever you are done writing inputs for a particular line, so let's try to understand in the most simplest way, right? I think this should give you a good understanding. See, or let me go to the PPT, then you will. Okay, so you remember the code, right? I think I can explain better through a PPT. So let's say you have written int a is equal to sc.nextInt, okay, print a, okay, then you have int b is equal to sc.nextInt, okay, then you have sop b. Okay, now let's say I've run the code, right? And now I'm waiting here. So my cursor is blinking, waiting for inputs, right? Let's say I write here 100 space, or let's say I put some spaces and I write 25 here. Okay. Now what will happen when I press enter? The moment I press enter, my code knows that whatever input that I wanted to write for this line, that has been done. So now the moment I press enter, the moment I press enter, let's say there is a backslash n here, enter, I press enter here, right? The moment I press enter, what will happen? The next int method starts working. So it will read an integer. It has to read an integer. So it starts reading 100. It reads this number 100 and then it encounters a space. So the moment it encounters a space, my cursor will stop here. My cursor will stop here. It will say, boss, I have read one number, and this number will be stored inside the variable a. So a will have 100 and a will be printed. Now, then I have another next int, right? I have this line has another next int and my cursor is here, right? So there is already some input for me to process. So what will happen? See, there are spaces. First, there are spaces. And I know that sc.nextInt will not read the spaces. It ignores or skips the spaces. So because there are spaces, it will skip all the spaces. Then it will read 2525, encounters the new line character. So it knows that the number that is read is 25, stores the number 25 in the variable b, and then I print 25. So 100 and 25 will be printed on two separate lines for me. Is this making sense? Hey, sc.nextInt कुछ नहीं कर रहा है. Whatever line is available ना, it will try to read integer from there. That's it. As simple as that. Why encounter space? See, if you give it a space now, then sc.nextInt will skip all the spaces. It will not read spaces. It will skip and go to the number. Okay, cool. So I hope it's clear, right? How to read space? We'll do everything, man. Don't worry. Okay. So is this part fine? Okay, cool. Let's go back. So next int is clear, right? Next int is clear. Okay. So where are we? So I'll encourage that you also do some, some here and there, try to play around with this and try to see how this actually works, right? So we have understood how do I take an input of an integer from the user. So sc.nextInt will be helping me, or the nextInt method will help me to take input a number from the user. Great. Now after nextInt, I have taken an integer. Now you must know that there should be a method to take long data type also as input, right? How do I take a long data type as input? So very simple. Similar to nextInt, you have a long method, right? So long c is equal to sc.nextLong. So when you write the sc.nextLong, it will basically read the number as a long and it will store the number in the variable c. Now you will come and ask me a question. Hey Adarsh, when I am typing the number in the terminal, do I have to write a capital L there as well? I will say no. Why? Because this time I am calling this button. I have pressed the button of next long. So automatically my compiler knows that the number that it will be reading, that has to be treated as a long, and that number will be stored in the variable C. Okay. So if you try to do it, I'll just tell you. So let's say 1, 2, 5. Okay. So it will read 5 as a long and it will store it in the variables. You don't have to write L after 5, not required, right? So when you are using next long, you don't have to write capital L in the terminal, right? The number will be automatically read as a long only because you are using the next long method. Okay. Now similarly, you can explore more methods, right? So now I know how to take whole numbers as input, right? I won't go into like bytes and all those short and thing, right? So I know how to take an integer as input, I know how to take a long as input, and same things will be for long, right? The next long basically reads a long number till it encounters a space or till it gets a new line character. That's it, right? Now once I have taken inputs of long and integers, then the next question will be, how do I take input of a, let's say, a floating point number or a double number? How do I take that input? So you will have method known as next float. You have a method known as next float, and this will help you to take input of a floating point number from the terminal. Okay. Same thing, same logic as of next int and next long, but next float is specifically used for taking floating point numbers input from the keyboard. Okay. Similarly, if you want to take a double as input, you have a method known as next double. As simple as that, right? So if I want to just show you one, let's show you one. Double D is equal to sc dot next double. Okay. Let's try to print D. Okay. So let me try to run it. So I think we have been a little bit slow today, but okay, I think no issues. I'll try to catch up. So I have 4 inputs this time. Let's take it as 4.58. Okay. So you will see that it works fine. It has taken all inputs, stored them, and given it an issue. Okay. So similar is your next double and similar is next float. So now you know how to take whole numbers as input. Okay. You know how to take floating point numbers and decimal numbers as input, right? What is left? Character is left and string is left and boolean is left. Okay. So for boolean, you can take the input via next boolean. होता है क्या? होता ही होगा. Next boolean, right? I am not sure, but yeah, I think let's see. Okay. The best part is we have all the compiler available. So boolean t is equal to, let's say, sc dot next boolean. होता है. No issues. So let's see dot next boolean. So this will read whatever you are writing as a boolean and it will store it inside the variable t. Okay. So now if I want to just remove comment these lines, I'll tell you what comments are. Okay. I'll also tell you that. I wanted to tell it today, but I think I'll tell it towards the end. Okay. Just give me 1 minute. Let's comment once. Okay. So I want to take a boolean as input and then let's print that. Okay. So let's run it. Okay. So it will expect that either you give a true as input or a false as input, right? So let's say I give a false. It read and stored it inside the boolean variable t, and when you print t, it says that yes, the boolean value is false. Okay. But now if you try to play around, right? See, you will have doubts. Can I write f as capital? Can I write f as small? Try it. Even I don't know everything, right? It's always a learning by interacting with the compiler and stuff like that, right? Try it. So it is case insensitive. You write a capital F or you write a small f, it doesn't matter, right? So now I know how to take input of whole numbers, floating point numbers, and decimal numbers, booleans, right? The next two things that I want to understand is, how do I take input of string and how do I take input of a character? Is everyone clear till here? Yes. What about float? It's next float, right? It's next float, as simple as that, right? Okay. So take input without using scanner class. See, there is one other way of taking inputs. If you don't use a scanner class, you have something known as a buffered stream reader. Okay. Buffered reader karke ek hota hai, right? But I think we can skip that for at this point of time. Scanner is much more easier to understand and operate with. So I'll stick to scanner for module 1 at least. Okay. Can you take 1 and 0? Again, good question. I appreciate all the questions here, right? But now let's see. मेरे को भी नहीं पता, करके देखते हैं, right? Let's try to do and see what does the compiler tell. If the compiler accepts, good for us. If it doesn't accept, no. So it complains, right? Exception, input mismatch. So if you are reading a Boolean, it is expected that you input either a true or a false. 0 and 1 will not be taken as input. Okay. So Boolean may you cannot give zeros and ones as input. Okay. So now I think we have 10 more minutes. Okay. So characters and strings as input, maybe I'll cover tomorrow. Okay. So one quick thing that I can share with you in 10 minutes is comments. Okay. What are comments, right? So see guys, you understand that if I write a line like this, if I write a line like this code was to demonstrate how scanner works, right? If I write a line like this and I try to run my code, what will happen? My compiler will complain. The compiler will tell, what is this line? Even if I put a semicolon now, then also it will complain. What is this? I don't know. This is beyond the rules of Java. You have written English here, right? Now that is where we come to the concept of comments. What are comments? Comments are basically lines that are ignored by the compiler. They are for our understanding, for our reference, right? So let's say I'm writing a code today. It might happen that after 10 days, I want to see what is that code doing. And I might forget what is that code doing after 20 days or after 1 year, right? So whenever you write code, especially in the industry, we write a well commented code. See, because nobody is permanent in a company, right? I am writing code today. Tomorrow, if I leave the company, some other person will come and he will have a look at the code. So it is very important that when another person looks at your code, he is able to understand what is happening. So we utilize the idea of a comment. What is a comment? A comment is a line that is simply ignored by the compiler. It is for our reference and our understanding. Okay, so that later when we look at the code, we are able to understand what was the particular code doing. Okay, so you have two concepts, right? One is a single line comment and one is the multi-line comment. What is single line comment? When I write double slashes, after double slashes, anything that you write, anything, this will be ignored by the compiler. This is a single line comment. And how do you write a multi-line comment? A multi-line comment is written by this slash followed by star. You write anything that you want across multiple lines, right? Any comment. And when you want to end, you put a star followed by a slash. This is the end of the comment. Okay. So this is a multi-line comment, a comment that is spread across multiple lines. So if you see here, this beautiful written thing that is online Java compiler, code, compile, run and debug, all these things. What is this? This is a comment only. See, slash star, starting of the comment. This entire thing is a comment ending with a star slash. So this is a multi-line comment. Okay. So is everyone clear with the idea of a comment and why do we use comments? Voice, hello, am I audible? Hello? Okay. Yeah, cool. So comments is clear, right? It's pretty simple. And see, I am discussing each and every single thing because I just want to make sure that all the people, irrespective of what your background is, you know everything from scratch, right? So we'll try. As things sab karenge, I think aaj to ab nahi ho payega. We don't have that much time. But yep. Take input by command line argument. Vibhuti, I think command line arguments we will skip for module 1. We don't require. And as such, you don't even need CLI arguments for any of the modules when you read about DS, right? So when you Sam's, I think there is some voice issue at your end. Sam's brmp@gmail.com. I think there is some voice issue at your end because everyone is getting voice fine, right? So where was I? Yeah. So I was that. Command line arguments is not required, right? And if you want to understand how command line arguments work, definitely you can Google up, try to read it up. Command line arguments work via this. Okay, the string args that you see now, this is used for CLI, but I would highly discourage at this point of time, at least for the beginning. Abhi will try to focus more on the fundamental aspects, right? Okay, cool. So now with this point clear, right? I think I'll introduce one last thing for you all before I call this class and end after 10 minutes, right? So let's say let's say I do something like this. I don't want to take inputs and all. Abhi, let's ignore. Okay. So let's say I do something like this. Int num1 is equal to 10. Okay. Int num2 is equal to 25. Okay. And then I print, let's say I print something like this. Very important. Okay. The sum, wait, why did it hang? Okay. So first of all, what is the plus operator, right? What is plus for strings, right? So if I tell you something like this now, I don't understand. Okay. If I write something like this, A, B, C, D plus X, Y, Z. Okay. So when you have two strings, this plus operator is basically a concatenation. This means you are concatenating. Concatenate मतलब एक के बाद एक लगा देना. You are basically stitching these strings one after the other. So when you do ABCD plus XYZ, you will get a new string ABCD XYZ like this entire string, right? So this plus operator basically, if it has two strings, right, it will concatenate. But if there are two numbers, then it performs addition. Okay. Again, this is a principle of OOP. I will not name it now. Polymorphism hai ye, but I think we'll talk about it in module 2 in more detail, right? But what I want you guys to understand, whenever you are adding two strings, it's basically concatenation, right? You are just putting your strings one after the other. Okay. So now, what do you think should be the output of this line? The sum of the two numbers is plus A plus B. What do you think should be the output? Let's guess it. Error. Okay, reasonable. 35, reasonable. 1025, again reasonable. Okay, great. Yeah, concatenation is used to add two or more strings. That's up to you. Okay. So some people are saying error, that is expected. I was expecting some. Some are telling that it will sum the numbers, expected that also. And some are telling it will give you 1025. That is also expected. Let's try to run it. I think the best answer will be given by the compiler only. And then we'll try to understand what happens. So I'm trying to tell you something about what happened. Okay, great. So आप लोग error सही पकड़े थे. So actually I wanted to write here num1 plus num2. Let's do that. Does your answer change now? जो लोग error बोल रहे थे, does your answer change now? The people who are saying error, does your answer change now? Okay. Sum of two numbers is 35. Chalo, let's try to run it. Let the compiler only give the answer. Okay, the sum of the two numbers is 1025. Okay. And if you try to very carefully observe what has happened, it has done a concatenation of the two numbers. It has not added them, it has concatenated. So now this actually gives rise to a concept. I want you guys to understand a concept. And that concept is something known as implicit typecasting. Okay. Again, आज के article में इसका भी link रहेगा. So you can read it up also. Okay. But I'll explain to you in brief. Implicit typecasting. So what actually happens is, let's say I give you two numbers. I ask you, hey, 4 plus 12. Okay. I have given you two integers, 4 plus 12. So you will add these two integers and you will give me the answer 16, which is also an integer, right? Correct. Now if I give you, hey, can you add this 8.956 plus, let's say 2? What you will give the answer, and that will give me the answer of what is implicit typecasting. Okay, let's come back to my chats. I want to get answers from you all on this. Okay, if I ask you, boss, what is 8.14 whatever plus 2? You will tell me 10.956. Okay, you didn't tell me 10, right? You didn't tell me 10. Array, normal maths. If in real life somebody asks you what is 8.2 plus 2, if you tell 10, then बोलेगा क्या maths आता है boss? 8.2 plus 2 is 10.2, है ना? So what I am wanting to say is, in your real life also, if somebody gives you 8.956 plus 2, real life ka baat ho raha hai. Okay, so you will give me the answer as 10.956. You will not give the answer as 10. If you give the answer at 10, then I am losing data. You are losing data. You are not giving me the precise answer. I am losing some amount of data. So the same concept is there in Java. What have you internally done? Knowing or unknowingly, one data type was float. Okay. The second data type was integer. And I know that a float is containing more information than an integer. Okay. A float is a more superior data type as compared to an integer. So पता है मैंने मनी मन क्या किया? What did I do internally? I wrote something like this: 8.956 plus 2.000. So internally I converted this integer to a float, added these two numbers, and gave you the answer in the floating point format. Do you all agree with me? I have converted the less superior data type into a more superior data type so that I don't lose any information. And then I give you the answer in the more superior data type. That is what we are doing, right? In real life. Okay. Same thing happens in Java. Same thing happens in Java. So in Java, there is an implicit matlab automatically, internally it is done. You don't have to worry about it. So there is a concept of implicit typecasting. That is, let's say I'm doing something like this. Let's say I give you an expression ABC plus 4. Let's say I give you an expression like this: system.out.println ABC plus 4. So what does the compiler see? This is a string. Okay. And this is an integer. Okay. And this implicit typecasting, now, string is the most superior data type. Think of it like this: string is the most superior data type because it is non-primitive, right? So string is most superior. Okay. Among the primitive data types, what do I agree? I can think that double is more superior than float. Float is more superior than, let's say, long. Long is more superior than int. Somewhat like this, right? So this is the increasing order of superiority of my data. So if I am adding a string with an integer, what will happen? Java knows that boss string is of the highest priority. This is the most, out of these two, this is more superior. So it will convert the less superior data type into the more superior. That is, it will convert this 4 into a string. So this 4 will be converted into a string, and then you will have a concatenation which will give you ABC4. Okay, this is implicit typecasting. Casting मतलब क्या हुआ? Cast मतलब I am changing, I am molding, I am changing the data type. So automatically I am doing an implicit typecasting because the two different data types are different. The data types are different. Similarly, the example that we took, right? What did I wrote? The sum is, okay. Then I put a plus, then A plus B. Okay. So whenever these expressions are evaluated, they are done from left to right. So when I evaluate this thing first, what is this? This is a string and this is an integer. So a string plus integer. So I will typecast this A to a string. Okay. So what was the value of A? Let's say it was 10. So 10 was typecasted to a string. And then I did a concatenation. So I got the sum is 10. This string was available. Now, once you get this entire string, you do a addition with B. Again, B is an integer, so it will be converted to a string. So B was 25. So you get a string 25 and you add or basically concatenate these two strings. So you get the output as the sum is 1025. This is how. Okay. How many of you understood what has happened here? I'll share links also, so you will understand what data type is more superior, what data type is less superior. But implicit is when the type conversion happens automatically. Explicit is when you are forcing it. Okay. Repeat typecasting. See, what is typecasting? Typecasting is you are changing the data type of one variable. One variable was a string and the other was an integer. So you changed or you converted that integer into a string. You have changed the data type. You have typecasted. You have done a typecasting. You have changed the data type. Okay. When you use double slash, it doesn't take. Yeah, it will ignore. That is a comment. That is a comment. Okay. And see guys, you will get a question, right? Ki boss, why are you not, let's say you are doing 10.5 plus 5. Why not convert the double into an int? Because there can be a chances of data loss. So internally what Java does it converts, the lower data type into a more superior data type. Okay. So the typecasting is done in such a way that no data is lost. Okay. So is this output clear to everyone? Is this output clear to everyone? Why are we getting what output we are getting? What if I want data loss? Then you will go for an external typecasting, explicit typecasting. आप खुद typecast करोगे कि boss, I want to convert a double into float. I am ready to take a data loss. That is explicit typecasting. Okay. Okay. Now, how do I avoid this thing? Correct. I think I got the answer. So generally, I can tell if I put brackets here now. See, I will just take for one more minute, guys, because I have a meet to attend after this. So I'll discuss and continue with this in tomorrow's class also. So what I want to say, if you put up brackets, जब आप maths की हो, right? So when I put a bracket, I basically increase the priority. First, the brackets are evaluated. BODMAS rule पता है सबको? Everyone knows the BODMAS rule. So first the brackets are evaluated, then off, then division, then this. So similar is for programming. If I put the brackets now, I am telling first evaluate this expression. And what is this expression? Integer plus integer. So integer plus integer will be integer. So 35 will be given here. And then this entire expression will be evaluated. String plus integer. So string plus integer, which is 35. So in this case, you will get the correct answer as you are expecting. The sum of the two numbers is 35. That's it. Okay. I will tell this, what is the precedence, what is all these things. I'll share the links today also so that it is easier for you guys to understand tomorrow. But do you get the basic essence behind implicit typecasting? Yes, okay. I'll discuss one or two more examples of typecasting tomorrow for the first 5 or 10 minutes. But yeah, I think this much typecasting is essential to know and you don't have to worry about more. And I'll share the links, and if you are reading through the links religiously and understanding, you don't need more than that. Okay. Chalo, cool guys. I think I'll end the class today and let's meet tomorrow and we'll continue. Hopefully you are not finding it boring and you are finding it interesting. Yeah, I know the space is a little bit slow, but yeah, I think that should be fine. Okay. Chalo guys, cool. We'll catch up. Okay. Chalo. Bye bye.